Welcome to Animate Architecture. This is a virtual mini-series that includes an animation, a short discussion, and an activity that you can join with us at home that explore how architecture can play a more animate and lively role in our everyday lives.
This is episode 2, the Troublesome Threshold. Please enjoy the show.
This episode of Animate Architecture explores the concept of scale. Scale is related to size, but it is not the same thing as the absolute size of an object. Rather, scale refers to the relationship of sizes between two different people, objects, or things.
Architects use scale to draw, imagine, and think about the large size of a building in relationship to the small size of a piece of paper. Since most buildings are designed in relationship to the human body, they are much bigger than the typical size of a piece of paper. In order for architects to communicate how the building is to be built, the drawings need to be scaled down. A key aspect of scaling is that both the object that's represented and the object itself share the same proportions, even though the absolute size of the objects are vastly different.
In this scene from the movie Zoolander, the main character examines a scale model of a proposed building. Of course, the model is much smaller than the proposed building that it represents. Small scale figures, or small representations of the human body, help us understand exactly how big the proposed building is supposed to be. Unfortunately, Derek Zoolander has never learned about scale, so he thinks that the proposed building is only large enough to accommodate ants.
Architects usually scale down their representations of a full-size building so that it can fit on a piece of paper. On the other hand, artists sometimes scale up an object in order to prompt us to understand something familiar in an unusual or magnified way. For example, Claes Oldenburg snuggles with an overscaled tube of toothpaste. The tube is overscaled because it's large in comparison to the typical size of a human body.
Similarly, in this art installation, we see an overscaled table and chairs. The furniture objects are overscaled because they are again larger than the typical human bodies that might use them. Scaling familiar objects like kitchen furniture and toothpaste creates a dramatic effect because we see the sizes of familiar objects that differ from our expectations. Because we know how big a tube of toothpaste is, since we brush our teeth twice a day, and we sit in chairs regularly, we immediately recognize that the scale of these objects has been drastically altered.
Changing the scale of an object or a space creates new or surprising opportunities for how we might interact with each other. The overscaled chair allows for many people to share it all at once.
Thresholds are any kind of opening in a wall, including doors and windows. In this episode of Animate Architecture, we watched as bugs and insects attempted to venture through various thresholds with different shapes and scales. In each scene, the bugs must find a way to adjust their bodies to fit through the particular threshold.
As the bees buzz into the scene, they're presented with a circular threshold. Compared to the first two bees, this threshold is perfectly scaled, and it allows these busy bees to pass through with ease. However, the third bee is much larger than his friends, and as a result struggles to make it through the threshold unimpeded. He must squeeze through the tight space in order to pass through the other side. Have you ever been stuck trying to make it through a door?
A small but organized swarm of gnats find themselves presented with a problem of scale and order. Normally content to wander the world in a swirling cloud of energy, their typical form doesn't allow the gnats to move through this threshold with a series of small cheese grater-like holes. The gnats need to organize themselves into perfect alignment and spacing in order to traverse the barrier. Lined up 2 by 2, the organized gnats pass through with a breeze.
The snail is a curious creature that hauls its home around with it wherever it goes. Most of the time, it's probably very convenient to have your own personal mobile home on your back, but this threshold presents a challenge. The arch-shaped threshold is big enough to let the snail's gooey body slide through, but not big enough for the shell to pass through as well. Imagine if you needed to pass through a door that was big for some parts of your body, but not big enough for others. Would you be able to make the same difficult decision as this determined snail?
Sometimes the scale of a threshold can save the day. The worm wriggles its way through a series of small holes that are perfectly scaled for its sliding segmented body. Because the worm is so much smaller than the bird and super flexible, the hungry bird is unable to capture its prey as the worm slips through the threshold.
Now that we've seen a few examples of the surprising ways that thresholds can prove troublesome for the characters that encounter them, let's make our own.
In the description of this video, you will find a link to download a printout template to help you make your own troublesome threshold.
In addition to the printout template, we suggest gathering the following tools: scissor or X-Acto knife, glue or tape, your favorite coloring supplies, pencils, pens or markers, and a ruler or straight edge. Now let's make our own troublesome threshold. This activity comes with 2 printouts. On the first page, there's a template to make your own threshold, and on the second page, there's a scale figure slider and that'll allow you to animate a series of scale figures through the threshold. We're going to begin with creating our own threshold. Step 1 is to draw a graphic profile on the template. For this, I'm going to use a green colored pencil. And in the center square, I'm going to draw a profile. And then you're going to want to make sure to include a threshold for your scale figure to travel through. In this case, I'm going to do an arch. Then, wherever you hit the dotted lines on the side, you're going to want to make sure to draw a triangle that will form the stabilizing side of your threshold. At this point, you've got your threshold drawn, and you're going to cut it out along the top profile. Before we do that, in this case, I'm going to add a little extra color in the form of some polka dots. All right, time to cut it out. Again, you're going to want to follow the dark line on the template, and then you're going to want to cut out the top side of your profile. Okay, I'm cutting along the dark cut line. Now, in order to get the threshold, we're going to have to cut out that middle portion. It's okay to cut through the base. It'll still stand up. All right, now that you've got this cut out, there's 2 more cuts you're going to need to make. Here and here, in order to separate the glue tab. Alright, and now we're going to use a ruler to help us fold along the dotted lines. In this case, you're going to want to fold away from you. We're going to do the same along the dotted line on the bottom. Once you've done that, you can see how it begins to fold together to form your threshold. So get your glue, and you're going to want to apply the glue to the striped glue area. Go ahead and do both of them at once. Remember to close up your glue so it doesn't dry out. And then you're going to want to fold this underneath the base so that you're basically creating a side that'll help your threshold stand up. And you're going to do the same on this side. And you produced your threshold. In this case, our opening extended a little bit, so it's okay to go ahead and trim off that tab. It may be helpful to have some paper clips to add a little weight to help your threshold stand up. So next thing to do is to get out the second sheet and cut out your scaled slider. In this case, because it's a little bit more delicate, the pieces are a little bit smaller, I'm going to use an X-Acto knife. It's also key on the slider to cut out the middle portion. It's the top of the slider. It's the slider tab. And that's the slider pull lever. In order to put the slider together, first thing you're going to want to do is glue the tab on the slider top. So in that case, we're going to put a little bit of glue just on the end of the tab. And again, this one you're going to want to fold away from you. So to the back, fold back, and fold back. So that you create a loop. And you want to make sure that the tab is not glued to the back of the slider top. Next, we're going to strengthen our pull tab by folding along the dotted line. So that essentially doubles up the pull tab, which will make it easier to make your scale figure slide. So put glue on the back of this and fold it over like a sandwich. So that's the top, the slider, and now we need to make the tab. So here there's a series of dotted lines that you're going to have to accordion fold. So you go from front to back and back to front. And when you're done with that, basically what you're going to end up with is a little T, so that this part can be glued to the slider lever and this part can go through the top. So we're going to do that now by putting glue only on the very bottom edge, again, where there's the glue hatch. A little bit of glue. And then that's going to get attached to your lever. All right. Next thing to do is to take your pull tab and thread it through the loop in the bottom of the top, just like that. And now we're going to take the two tabs that we just glued to the top of the pull and slide those through the slot in the top. Once you do that, you can fold these over and you've created a slider. This is a mechanism that gets used a lot in pop-up books. Now, last thing left to do is to cut out your scale figure. Make sure to pick out whichever is your favorite. In this case, we're going to go with a Sears Tower. Now you've got your small scale building. Again, feel free to add a little bit of color to any of these items. Color our building blue. And then you're going to fold it along the dotted line at the bottom. Now in this case, if you want to reuse your slider, you may want to just use a paper clip or a little piece of tape to tag your scale figure to the slider. And now you've got a scale figure and a threshold. Feel free to experiment and cut out any of the other items and have fun making your own troublesome threshold.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration of scale and the unexpected ways that it can animate the architecture that we encounter every day. Tune in next time for more adventures in animate architecture.